Well, if it isn't my Waterproofians back for another Waterproof Records with Jacob Givens, it is I, your fearless host. I am fearless. Today I'm fearless because we're going to be tackling an album that probably so many metal purists out there will give me so much shit for, but I don't care because it's an important album to me and we're going to tackle it. So I'm glad you've tuned in. If you came in today and you're like, why is he doing this one? Well, I'll get to that. Or if you're coming in on this one and you're going, I am so excited he's doing this one. I have to cover it. It's super important to my life, to my youth, to my upbringing, and just really informed a lot of my musical choices in life. I've talked about it here and there before, but this time around, we are going to get into a classic, a 1991 album, The Black Album by Metallica. Oh, I did that the wrong way around. I'm supposed to say, it's time to talk about The Black Album by Metallica. Let's go.
Things are gonna change, I can feel it. If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna...
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records with Jacob Givens.
I'm pretty ready and excited for this one. I hope you are too, and I hope that if you've never been a fan, that maybe this is the episode where you're like, all right, I'll give it a chance. Or if you're some of the people that just at the beginning, you saw that I was covering the Black Album and I wasn't going all the way back to Justice for All or Master of Puppets or Ride the Lightning or Kill 'Em All, and I wasn't starting there, and you're like, why not? Well, we're going to get into that. But before we get into that, we've got to talk about my sponsor, DistroKid. If you guys don't already know, you should be definitely checking out my special link, distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof, and you're going to get yourself that 30% off for your first full year of uploading your songs. But I talked about it on the last episode, and I'll tell you again, DistroKid has an iOS app. Key features: sign up and pay for a new DistroKid account using Apple's in-app purchase, or sign in an existing one with two-factor authentication. It says 2FA here, and I'm lucky that my brain was able to grab it quick enough. You can upload new releases, you can see your DistroKid bank and withdraw earnings, you can get notified when you've earned royalties and withdraw from the app via push notifications. So many features that you need to be taking advantage of. I love DistroKid. I can't wait to be using the app on my phone and make it so much easier when I release more music later this year, which, yes, I'm working on. So once again, check my bio, check my link tree, distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof. But now we're going to get into the nitty gritty. And the nitty gritty here today is Metallica and the Black Album. Yeah! I wore my shirt for those that watch the show. I actually don't have a Metallica shirt. Isn't that insane? I need to have a Metallica shirt. I have on today, I have the skull hands, the skeleton hand doing the horns, the rock horns, and it's got a little guitar neck on it. I love this shirt. I felt like it was the most metal up your ass type visual that I could bring today for my Metallica episode. It's funny that I don't have a Metallica t-shirt because I absolutely should have one by now. But it goes all the way back to my childhood and just how strict my mom and dad were about that kind of clothing. I didn't really have a lot of band shirts. I had some Smashing Pumpkins shirts by the time I was in 8th or 9th grade because they were, they weren't anything that my mom thought was, creepy or weird. I think I had a Pearl Jam shirt. I had a Soundgarden shirt. But when it came to Metallica, a lot of that heavy metal imagery, that was just too much, God forbid it was Slayer or Testament or Pantera, but Metallica, they have these iconic shirts. If you've seen my Metallica TikTok or Instagram video where I'm reacting to one, that was such an early video for me. Because I knew I had to talk about Metallica way early on in making videos about albums that were impactful. Because everybody who listens to this show knows that Siamese Dream is one of the most important albums to me. But before I got onto the Smashing Pumpkins, track and went down that road, I would say for a little while there, Metallica and Megadeth were probably the biggest bands in my universe for a solid year and a half. In that like 1991 to 1992, 92 and a half, right around the time that Nirvana's coming in. And But it was a really, really big band for me. And I chose the Black Album because it came out on August 12th, 1991. And that is so many of the albums that we're talking about here on the show in that era, that this is such an impressionable time in my life. And while Metallica is different from grunge and alternative, they were still very much influencing each other at the time. You know, these were groups that were all experiencing a lot of success or exposure on MTV. And I mean, in the famous Alice in Chains Unplugged, Metallica shows up in the audience to watch them play. And, that's the famous story about why the bassist bass said, why friends don't let friends get haircuts. It's because Metallica had famously cut their hair short in such a shocking move at the time. But that's where that whole thing came from, because these bands knew each other. They were proud of each other. They were influenced by each other. And I'll get into that even more as we get into the Black Album. But I'm going to need you Gen Xers who are older than me, who are Metallica purists, and you'll say Black Album is when they sold out, or Black Album is when it started to go downhill. I know that those that are older than me or into a lot of metal bands, that you'll argue and you'll say, Black Album isn't good. I'm here to say I disagree. It was a starting point for a lot of people my age at the time. It was a great transition, and a lot of artists at the time were incredibly excited for Metallica, that they got through, that they broke through. I think it was the drummer of Anthrax who said in an interview, he was like, watching the success of the Black Album was like having your older brother go to college and he ends up becoming Bill Gates. That was the quote that I read. And that's how it felt for a lot of them. It's like, didn't just go to college, but he like went to college and dominated everything and ended up becoming like the biggest act in the world. My exposure to Metallica was probably on the one video on Headbangers Ball. That's what I made the TikTok about, is watching the one video. And even though Injustice for All came out in 87, I don't think that video made it onto MTV. I'm not 100% sure of the date, but it might have been 1989, because Metallica famously didn't ever want to do music videos. And then they did do this incredibly dark, long music video with Johnny Got His Gun and the footage from the war movie. And that's what I made my TikTok about, right? I'm sitting there on the floor. I'm watching Headbangers Ball with my brother. And I remember this so vividly because this is the first time that we'd ever seen James Hetfield in this kind of, it was black and white, but they had almost like, it was like a hue to it. Like in my mind, in my memory, it almost had like a greenish faded black and white. And, James Hetfield had this goatee, and I remember my brother and I thinking his goatee looked funny in the video, like kind of sparse. And we were laughing about that in our very asinine, childlike ways. And then there was this, this disturbing music video of SOS, help me, all the footage from Johnny Got His Gun. If you've never seen the video, it's just so dark. It's from this movie about a guy who's in war, and he steps on a landmine and he loses his arms, his legs, his sight. He can't speak. He's just laying on this bed. And he sings about it in the song, and it's so messed up. And here I am, a little kid, just watching this video, just mouth open. And it's the double bass of the drum, which just wasn't very common in more mainstream metal at the time. I think that a lot of metalheads would come forward and be like, there were other people doing it, but Lars Ulrich having that song really connect with people, and us hearing that double bass like that, it was really a first for a lot of us to hear that sound and just having the riff drive with it. I think it stayed with everybody forever, because I've seen symphonic versions of one. I've seen all these interpretations of it. And obviously in metal, the double bass has gotten out of control. Like the ability and skill the drummers can do now with their feet and make that just sound like a completely seamless rattle. And I don't mean like the studio tricks that make it sound fast. I'm talking about the real gifted drummers. Joey Jordison from Slipknot, R.I.P., just so many drummers that can just make it sound completely easy to hit that double bass. But it was really the first of its kind in some ways, at least in my experience. All I can say is my experience. But I started out by saying, I want you Gen Xers older than me to just let go for a little bit. Just let go and go with me on the fact that the Black Album could have some value in the conversation. Because I saw the one video. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was cool. I thought it was scary. I thought it was depressing. And then I don't think I had much other exposure to Metallica other than an older cousin, giving me a copy of Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning. I think those were the first two that I got my hands on right around the time that the Black Album is getting close to coming out. And Fade to Black, I thought was amazing. Sanitarium, I thought was amazing. And that was what my young years were being able to kind of start taking in, is these songs that started out slower and then the solos built. And they were really influencing how bad I wanted to play guitar. You've heard me talk about with other interviews about the album that got me to want to start playing guitar, and that was listening to Kirk Hammett play. I was strongly influenced by his skills and abilities on the guitar. And so I would listen to those songs and I was really moved by just the guitar work on those albums. And along comes Enter Sandman. And that song has been played a million times over. It's almost, had as much repetition as Smells Like Teen Spirit, as one of those songs that just got played to death. But if you can go back and think about the first time you sat down and you saw the music video for Enter Sandman, and you get to that prayer, now I lay me down to sleep, and the whole sequence, the giant semi truck driving through that bed on the highway. I mean, I can remember being so excited about this album and about that song. Going to school dances and getting the DJ to play Enter Sandman. And then you and your little, tiny little friends go up and try to mosh each other at the school dance while all the popular kids would watch us from a distance and be like, what are they doing? What are those weirdos doing? We had this, we had Smells Like Teen Spirit. It was all just part of this exciting energy to let that aggression out. It wasn't like you were going to be at a school dance and they were going to play, something, and they were going to play For Whom the Bell Tolls. You weren't going to get that, but you were going to get Enter Sandman because it was on the radio. It was on MTV. So these, junior high, middle school dances, they would play these songs that you get so excited about. And I remember being excited about it. And a cool thing about Enter Sandman, to tell you a little bit a history about that song, there's been a lot written about Metallica. They have tons of biographies. There's tons of documentaries. You probably can digest just about anything you want to know. So I'm not going to hit you with too many facts today as much as I'm going to hit you with my experience, because I think that there's a lot of you out there that will remember what it was like and maybe enjoy this process. It was one of the first songs written for the album with the last lyrics written for the album. The initial concept for the riff and the guitar part was Soundgarden inspired. Kirk Hammett had been listening to some Soundgarden and was really feeling driven to use that riff, that style, and now you can hear it and you're like, okay, that's got that Kim Thayil touch to it. So he was inspired by that. That's another example of the grunge kind of sneaking its way into the metal community. And then it was originally he played the riff 2 times through, and I think it was Lars. It was like, make it 4, really drive it home. And then the song starts to come together, and there's this whole part of Kirk Hammett's like wind down after the solo before we get into the prayer. This wow, that was, he confessed years later. He said that was it was Heart. Magic Man, I think. And it was a part of the guitar in that song, but it wasn't from their version. It was taken from Ice-T had sampled it in this song off of his Power album. And Kirk Hammett heard that guitar sound that Ice-T had sampled and was like, ooh, I'm gonna use that. That's a really great kind of wind down from the solo. So he put it in Enter Sandman. So the original lyrics that James Hetfield is working on for Enter Sandman are about crib death. Yeah, really dark. And that is SIDS, as they call it. And so he was writing lyrics about this incredibly dark subject matter. And right away, Bob Rock, who produced the album, and Lars are like, really encouraged him to revisit those lyrics and try to find something else to write about because, they probably had an instinct that was I don't know. Look, there was a lot of dark subject material in other albums before this, but there was just something that they had as an instinct that they just didn't like the lyrics. They didn't like where it was going. And it pissed James Hetfield off. He did not like that when he heard it at first, because he was kind of like, I write the lyrics, but it challenged him. And so much of the writing of this album, if you've ever seen any of the behind the scenes of their time recording the Black Album, it was stressful. I remember I digested so much Metallica stuff. You know what I mean? Like I would watch the big set, the live shit, binge and purge. I would watch the documentaries. I would watch the videos. I would watch the behind the scenes. And I just remember seeing how tense and stressful this entire experience was with Bob Rock. And then there was the documentary years later, Some Kind of Monster, and just the tension. And you learned that it was a really tense recording process for the band because they spent 8 months and they all were recording together in one room, and they hadn't done that before. Bob Rock was challenging them to try new things, to build a vibe, to build an energy. And when you think about where they were as a band at this time, they were just wanting to try something new, and they just didn't quite know how to do it. So anyway, back to Sandman. So James Hetfield eventually, near the end, the last lyrics to write, he kind of does this more mild-mannered version on the Sandman lore. And he had written down Enter Sandman as the song title. And Lars Ulrich, growing up in Denmark, didn't even know what a Sandman was. Didn't know the lore at all. But he ended up dialing it back and making it much more accessible, which makes it what the hit song that it is now. And the prayer in the middle, I believe that was Bob Rock and his son went in and recorded the prayer and then showed it to James, and he liked it. And so that ended up in the song. But the rest is history. Enter Sandman, you kidding me? You still hear that opening guitar part, and all these years later, we're on 32 years later, and it still stirs up something, even though we've heard it a lot. Stirs up a feeling of a time in my life of hearing Enter Sandman at school dances and moshing. Did you guys do that? Did you mosh at your school dance? I hope so. The moshing changed. Boy, oh boy, did it change. The moshing in the early 90s, mid 90s was very different. It was kind of like slamming against each other. That's what it did. I'll never forget when I saw a mosh pit in like the early 2000s somewhere, and I saw these people windmilling their arms, and I was like, what are they doing? What is that? And someone was like, they're moshing. And I was like, that is not how you mosh. It was something that was really confusing to me because it just was not part of the mosh pit culture of, when I grew up. We weren't flailing our arms around. We were just slamming into each other, You know what I mean when I say windmilling? I'm talking about like that spinning of arms. Anyway, but it became a thing for the kids that would grow up in the early 2000s. And now when I go see metal shows all the time. I don't know if I've ever told you that on the show, but I go see Black Dahlia Murder. I went and saw, who did I went to the Chaos and Carnage tour. I saw, oh my gosh, Dying Fetus and Suicide Silence was there. I didn't get to stay for them, but I've been to Summer Slaughter. I've been to like 3 years of Summer Slaughter. I've seen Meshuggah, Code Orange. I've seen, oh my gosh, I have an extensive list of metal bands that I've seen over the years. And I love metal. I'm a huge metal head. Carnifex, Rivers of Nihil, some of these, Amon Amarth, Arch Enemy, so many. I've probably seen like 40 or 50 metal bands because I go to those ones where they play, like 20 bands during a 7-8 hour period of time. But Black Dahlia Murder is one of my all-time favorites, R.I.P. Trevor. But I've never seen Metallica live, and that's crazy to me. I've been a fan since easily 90, 91, and I've never seen them play live. And I'm hoping so much that I get to see them this time around. I know they're touring on this new album, 72 Seasons, and I really do like the sound of a lot of the songs on the album. I think it really returns to their roots. The riffage is like more in a standard tuning, which you just don't hear that in metal as much anymore. It's got a lot more in E and A and these driving riffs that are higher, than the really deep low tune stuff that you're hearing now from metal. But I really want to see them play live because I just don't know how many more years they're going to be going on tour. They seem like they got a lot of energy still for the age that they're at, which I'm not saying they're too old, but I'm just saying it's, time adds up and it probably gets a lot harder to tour, more grueling on the body. But anyway, I cannot believe I haven't seen them. But I was saying that because I was saying I've seen live shows, a lot of live metal shows. And there's just something about the energy of getting out there. And I don't have the courage to do a mosh pit anymore. Look, the last couple metal shows I was at, I saw the pit going crazy and I just hung back. Because I was like, I'm not going to throw out my shoulder. I'm not going to hurt myself really bad. Because there's a lot of young, drunk people in there and people that get a little crazy in the pit. But I will say that metalheads are some of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your life. If you've never been to a heavy metal show, I always tell this to people. I'm like, whether you think that it's scary sounding music or evil or like the black clothes and the evil artwork or whatever, every metal show I go to, the crowd, the fans base are kind. They're friendly. They're like really gentle in the way that they pass by you. There's not a lot of aggression. The aggression is in that mosh pit, in that, when you want to do that, but everybody else is really friendly and really kind. And that people who aren't into the heavy metal scene are always surprised to hear that. But I think it's because if you're ever into a kind of music that's maligned or frowned upon by the majority of the world, you're kind of alone in a lot of these interests and likes. And so it's one of those things that you like and you enjoy and the majority of people don't enjoy. And so when you all get together, you're like, hey, we're all metalheads, So I don't know. That's been my experience so far. But back to the Black Album. Some of the cool things about this album also. So they have got into this new idea that they're gonna try something new. Metallica purists, I know Kill 'Em All is great. I know Ride the Lightning is great. I know Master of Puppets is great. And Justice for All, mixed feelings. Actually, out there on vinyl, I own Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning on a newly pressed vinyl, a new release. I'd still like to get a Justice, a Black, and Kill 'Em All. I need to get those as well because they are all great albums. People have mixed feelings about Justice for All, and even the band themselves don't really like it. The lack of bass, which is the joke that is done to death. Anytime you do anything about Justice for All you'll get, it's like you could set your watch to it. The jokes about the lack of bass. I guess it's just to be expected in this like kind of meme culture that we live in now. That people cannot resist, like, oh, the bass. But it's not a new or original angle. It's been said many, many times before. But Justice for All is an album that even James and Kirk and Lars, all of them, they were like, wow, we really went too proggy, went too long on those songs. They were super long songs. And then when they would play them live, they would just feel this like, wow, we really, really went way too long on a lot of these. They would see the crowd and the audience kind of, lose interest or lose focus with just such a long song and all the places that it has to go, which is some of the appeal of Justice for All. One. But I guess maybe it's just the repetition of having so many in a row. But here we've got this band that really is one thing, and then Cliff Burton dies. And then that's why Justice for All is just kind of not quite succinct and sharp enough. Once Cliff is gone from the band, once he dies and they're bassless, then they've got to figure out how to record that album. And they do the album, then they bring in Jason Newsted. And he's the new bass player, but he doesn't really get any involvement on Justice. But this album, he gets involvement. And they knew going into it, they wanted a different sound. And so they find out that Bob Rock at the time is known for producing Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood, which is like, at the time, it is known that is one of the best quality recordings out there. Just the sound, the tone, everything. So they know that he's recorded that one. He's recorded an Aerosmith, I think Permanent Vacation. He's recorded these big albums. Metallica's not necessarily a fan of what Bob Rock is working on as a producer, but they're at least thinking to themselves, let's get him as somebody to mix the album. So they approach him, they ask him to do it, and he gets approached at the same time by Richie Sambora from Bon Jovi. And he's got to make a decision. Do I help my pal Richie Sambora do his first album, or do I do Metallica? And he agrees to do Metallica, but he says, I don't want to just mix it, I want to produce it. And the clash between the members of this band and Bob Rock are, world famous. Everybody knows that just the arguments and the difficulty that they went through while recording in the studio is so well documented. You can see the fights. You've heard the stories about how Bob Rock called James Hetfield Dr. No because he said no to things before Bob was even finishing a sentence. So much pushback, so much conflict. And I think even when the recording was done, Lars and Bob didn't speak for like a year. Didn't even talk to each other until everybody had calmed down. But then he went on to help him produce Load, Reload, Saint Anger. So obviously they formed some kind of trust and friendship with him through all of it. But that 8-month period of time, incredibly stressful, lots of infighting, but it really challenges and pushes the band to try different things. The next song on the album, Sad But True. When the band brings that to Bob Rock and shows him that, it's the original version that they came with was in standard tuning, just tuned up to E. And he was the one who was like, we gotta go lower. The band was no strangers to lower tunings. They had played, previous albums with lower tunings, but he pushed him to do the drop D. And that really gives that fullness, that heaviness to Sad But True that I think it needed. So in that regard, I think he was 100% right. I mean, he was right about a lot of things on this album. But it's funny that I just said that because the next thing is Holier Than Thou. That's the third track on the album. Bob wanted that to be the single to go with. And James and everybody else in the band were kind of like, that song's dumb. It's kind of a silly, stupid song. And it's funny because when you read things from the members of the band after this, you read how many of them are like, yeah, that song's not that great, and this song's not that great, and that they weren't that happy with it. But there's just when they got it right on this album, they got it right. And I remember listening to this album front and back over and over again. I remember buying it with the all black cover. I mean, who could forget that Metallica came out with an all black cover? It wasn't all black. There was the snake, the coiled snake in the bottom right, and the Metallica on the left. But back then, I don't know if my eyes were poor or something, but I swear you could barely see it. I feel like in later releases, I feel like you can tilt it a certain way, you can see it. But on those old cassette tapes, it was really hard to see that there was anything there. It kind of looked just black when you looked at it. And then you would tilt it a certain side and you go, oh, there's a snake there. And there's the Metallica logo. The story behind that black cover, which was, it's funny because Spinal Tap had done it in their movie. They landed on that because I guess Lars was flipping through a heavy metal magazine, and he was going through the heavy metal magazine, and there was all these, cartoon characters that were being used, this like gruesome artwork and skeletons and skulls and Vic from Megadeth and, all the Anthrax and the Iron Maiden and all the bands at the time were doing all these colorful things. And he just was like, we need to get as far away from this as possible. We need to be simple and clear. And none of these, looks and feel to our music. And so it was just decided, let's do solid black. It's called Metallica. We call it the Black Album now, but it was just called Metallica. And, this is their 5th studio album. And I think they thought about they were going to call it 5. That was one of the names. And then the dumbest name that they joked about, I don't even know if it was in all seriousness, they joked about calling it Married to Metal. And this is kind of sad, but apparently Jason, Kirk, and Lars were all going through divorces while they were recording this album. They were all going through divorces. So they joked, well, we're married to metal. And so that was like a joke in the studio. And so I kicked around for a little bit to be called Married to Metal. Thank God they didn't call it that. That's like, what a title. Oof. But yeah, they were all going through divorces at the time. And so they ended up just, keeping it clean and simple. And I don't know if you remember, but there was like a documentary about Metallica touring, and they even did a bit with Spinal Tap where the Spinal Tap like calls out like, hey, our album and we had our album that was in all black, which was a bit in the Spinal Tap movie. And I think they totally chalked it up to being like a funny coincidence, something that also happened for them. So that was the cover with the snake, the coiled snake, the Don't Tread on Me snake, which is from that 1700s, American Revolution flag. And there's of course a song on here called Don't Tread on Me. One thing I wanted to say, because I've been talking about Jason Newsted, who's not in the band anymore, but I remember thinking that dude was the coolest. I really, really loved the era that Jason Newsted was in Metallica. And I think it's unfortunate that they parted ways, and I don't think it was good. I don't know much about that. So I don't think it was a good parting of ways. But he had such a coolness about him. And by the way, this is not me shit talking Robert Trujillo. I think he's awesome. I think he's a great bass player. I remember first seeing Robert Trujillo like in Infectious Grooves and, coming from that whole Suicidal Tendencies corner of musicians, and seeing him get into Metallica. I was actually pretty excited that they found him. And I think he's a great addition to the band. And I think he's been in a great part of the band for the past, it's been 25 years he's been in the band, maybe more. But Jason Newsted had this coolness about him with that long hair and those shaved sides. I remember thinking that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen back then. It was like anytime I saw a guy with long hair and shaved sides, I was like, does it get any cooler than that? Corey Glover from Living Colour, and Mike Patton and Faith No More, just seeing that shaved side, the long hair. I just like, man, that's what I want. I want my hair like that so bad. I wouldn't do it now, but I do like having long hair. But we were not allowed to grow our hair long, and seeing Jason Newsted like headbang with that long hair going down and just the shaved head on each side. I used to watch that in the videos and be like, oh, it's so cool. And then he would headbang, his head like this, and it would go like in a perfect circle with his hair around like this with that shaved head. But I just thought he was so cool. And then they would do these live shows, and he would get up there on the mic and go, hey, hey, hey. I just thought, oh man, what a cool guy. I really liked Jason Newsted and what he brought to the band. And this is so specific to that season of them. But again, no one can beat Cliff Burton. So before you come for me and be like, ooh, Cliff was the best. Of course, Cliff was Metallica. Cliff Burton was a tragic loss for this man, and a fantastic bass player, so innovative, so creative, and really brought so much to the table that I think we saw once he was gone. It was a secret ingredient of the band that got taken away too soon. But again, I will say that I enjoy listening to Justice for All, and I enjoy the Black Album. I do. This album spawned so many singles: Enter Sandman, The Unforgiven, Wherever I May Roam, Nothing Else Matters. I mean, all of those were music videos that ran during this time, and making them just one of the biggest bands in the world. I think that the Black Album is in the history of music. It is one of the highest top-selling albums in the world. I think it broke records for being 10 years consecutively on the Billboard. It's one of the biggest metal albums of all time. And metal purists will say, well, it's just not heavy. It loses the thrash sound. And you're right. You're right. It became way more accessible. It became way more digestible. But I'm going to tell you right now, for us in 7th grade, moshing at our school dances, it was still heavy. You know, I wasn't sitting next to girls in school who were just suddenly into Metallica. It was still not the norm. Sure, us nerds and uncool kids like to mosh to it, and you older kids with your metal up your ass t-shirts and your Ride the Lightning swagger, you were harder. You had your popped jean jacket collars and you were walking around with your cigarettes and your Trans Am. You were straight up Billy from Stranger Things. I get it. You were tough. You were against the man. The lyrics were, political and just against just the atrocities of the world. And this was like Metallica going emo, James Hetfield was writing internally looking lyrics on this album. And that was just like, what? Emotional? We're going to get emotional, Metallica? And you know what? Nothing Else Matters. That wasn't even supposed to be on the album. James Hetfield had written it while they were on the road about a girlfriend. He had written a love song to a girlfriend. And he wasn't even planning on putting it on the album. And then he shows it to everybody and they're like, wow, that's pretty great. We should put it on the album. Kirk Hammett was a little, weary. I think he even said, he was like, oh my God, James wrote a song to his girlfriend. Like, we're going to put that, so it took a minute for everybody to come around. But think about how huge that song is. What a big deal it is. It was famously the song that if you were just learning how to play guitar, the thing that we all did with Nothing Else Matters is it's the open low string and then the top three, and you pick without holding anything on the fret. Sorry, my E, G, B, E. Sorry, got to list off the notes. And you pick them open without putting anything on the fretboard. And when you were learning guitar at this time, which I got my first guitar in 1991 for Christmas. And it was like the first thing that you could be like, hey, you want to learn how to play Nothing Else Matters? There's been countless parodies and videos made about that. But anyway, it was a song that wasn't supposed to be on the album. And then it ends up being on the album and it's huge. I don't even think Kirk Hammett plays on the song. I think famously he does not play on the song. And this is an example of one of the songs on the album that James Hetfield really sings, uses his singing voice. And this is kind of opens the door for him as a more vocal performer. And if you didn't know, he is shown Chris Isaak's music during this time, like Wicked Game and that music. And he turns to Bob Rock and he's like, how do I sing like that? How do I sing like that? And Bob Rock's like, well, you don't double your vocals. You don't do double tracks. You do a single track so I can really hear the nuances of your voice. And then we just need to get you comfortable and relaxed and really work together. And that is what was implemented for songs like The Unforgiven and Nothing Else Matters. Just teaching him to have a much more calm, relaxed performance with his voice. And it works. He does a great job on those and really takes a step back. And even though he wrote the song, he was fearful about this being on the Black Album. The album itself was played live. There was a release party, if you will, where it played at Madison Square Garden for thousands of people. Not the band not playing, just the album. Thousands of people are there. And James Hetfield is said to have been listening and so nervous, just afraid that Nothing Else Matters was going to start playing and that everybody would just start rioting and that they would just be losing their minds and just ridiculing him for doing this ballad. But people responded to it really, really well. I read this somewhere. I don't know if it's true, but someone said that Kurt Cobain from Nirvana was at Madison Square Garden that night listening to the release of the Black Album, of this album. So I didn't fact check it, so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. Wherever I May Roam, that video, The Unforgiven. I just made a video the other day about these videos. You know, The Unforgiven was like this art house video. It was like a little small movie. I think they premiered it in November of 91 with like an 11-minute film version where you didn't even see the band playing in the footage at all. It was just like a short film with the music. And then they tapered it back to the 6.5 minute version that has footage of the band, and that's the video that ran. But I have so many memories of watching that video of this, you know, this kid. He crawls through the tunnel, he gets into this little space, and you figure out, you're like, oh, the kid's blind. I think he's blind, and he's collecting all these trinkets in this room, and then he's trying to carve his way out. And then, you know, he grows old. And then by the time he finally gets the block out, he can't, you know, he dies on the floor. So these are all, you know, something that you could look at philosophically, at looking at how somebody looks at life and what the purpose of life is. And there's a lot of things that you could apply to it once you have a much more world awareness and understanding of existence. But I'm 13 at the time, 12, 13 years old. And I am like, whoa, cool video. You know, wow, what a great short film. It definitely influenced how I look at filmmaking. You know, it had such a cool black and white texture with blurred out edges and lines. There was definitely things that I saw while I was watching that video that I was like, wow, that's a really interesting technique that I would see in David Lynch films, or I would see in something else. And music videos back on MTV back then, the really good ones, the ones that had those big budgets, there was some amazing kind of storytelling and short film work in those. And The Unforgiven was great. The Wherever I May Roam video, that was just live footage of them on tour. And for a guy who's never seen Metallica live, that is like the most, that's me living vicariously through that video. That's what I imagine seeing Metallica was like, you know, during that era. This is also the time that they're touring extensively on the Black Album. And, you know, you see Wherever It May Roam. And this is the tour that James Hetfield accidentally steps in front of some pyrotechnics and ends up giving himself 3rd-degree burns up his body, you know, up his arms and legs. And really dangerous. He was walking, it was like 12 foot of flame. This was the tour with Guns N' Roses and Metallica. And he walks into this pyrotechnic flame and burns himself. And he ends up being okay, but for the remainder of the tour, I think he doesn't get to play guitar, and he has to, you know, be in a rap, and he can sing, but he can't play guitar until his arm heals. But that was a big thing. I remember Kurt Loder coming on MTV News and be like, you know, James Hetfield of Metallica walked into a pyrotechnic. Which, if you didn't know, that is a Megadeth bass line on MTV News right there. That is a famous, it's Peace Sells, right? I'm not crazy, am I? It's Peace Sells. Yeah, it's the Peace Sells bass line. Anyway, we've been going for so long now. We've been talking for a while. This is such a fun album. You guys know what's so funny is that normally when I choose an album I'm going to do, because I mean, I have guests, but then I choose my own albums, and there's so many exciting ones coming. I have so many more. Trust me. I have tons that you've been asking for, some that you haven't been asking for. But when this came to me that I was going to talk about the Black Album, I was like, of course I'm going to talk about the Black Album. Of course I'm going to talk about it, because I didn't even have to read up that much on this. Mostly, I have a good understanding of the history of these albums, and I do a little refresher, like kind of study up on it. But for this one, I mean, honestly, like I said, before the Smashing Pumpkins love, I was Metallica obsessed. So I knew Bob Rock, The Studio Time, Kirk Hammett, Jason Newsted, James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich. I knew this band. I watched so much. I used to sit there with my buddy Brian, and we would hold our guitars and we would watch videos of Kirk Hammett and watch videos of Dave Mustaine and Marty Friedman and Megadeth and Metallica. And we used to just want to like learn how to play guitar by osmosis through the television. We wanted their skills and abilities to just come to our fingertips. And I used to sit there and practice Hammett's solos, you know, and on this album, the wah pedal, boy, it's everywhere. So it's not like I can go through every single song and tell a story about it. Of Wolf and Man, Bob Rock was like, why are we singing about a wolf? Was on the fence about that, then came around. My Friend of Misery and The Struggle Within, those were songs that the band stopped playing live for like 25 years. And then they just, I think it was sometime in the mid 2000s, they decided to start, 2012 or something like that. They started playing them live again, but they'd stopped for the longest time. But honestly, the standout tracks in this became singles. I do love The Struggle Within. I love My Friend in Misery. I love The God That Failed. Of Wolf and Man, I remember thinking that one was kind of funny too, Shape Shift. Back to the meaning of life. Nothing Else Matters. Great song. Through the Never's great. Don't Tread on Me. Don't Tread on Me is all right. But anyway, this whole thing, man, it's just a classic album. And I could geek out just as much about Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All. Those are all so great, but I would really dig in deeper after this. I mentioned up top that, my cousin had given me, or somebody had given me, a copy of Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning on a dubbed cassette. And so I definitely had listened to those before this came out, and I was into them. But once this came out, I became even more obsessed with Metallica, and I would just go back and listen to them over and over and over again. And it wasn't really until, Nirvana drops in 92. 91. They drop in 91, and I get the cassette tape that Christmas. And it's like in 92 where I start to transition a little bit away from Metallica and Megadeth and Testament and Pantera, and I start moving more into the alternative and the grunge and the Pumpkins and Pearl Jam, and I move a little bit away from it. And it took me a while to kind of come back. But as an adult now, I still love listening to these albums. They bring back a lot of good memories. And if you've been with me since the beginning, if you've been with Waterproof Records since the very beginning, this whole thing goes back to my friend Ryan Demarest, who died in the spring of 2021. And when I made that Nirvana TikTok in my backyard, I was really still in mourning of his death. He was 10 years younger than me. And Metallica was a big one for us. It was a big one. I remember the weekend that he died, I sat there and just cranked Metallica. And I had several sobbing moments because I thought about how much I missed a friend that you could geek out about Metallica with. Because you can geek out about Metallica with friends. It's definitely one of those bands that you can really get into. I've talked to people that are younger than me, 7, 8, 9, 10 years younger than me, and they don't get it. They don't get Metallica at all. They're like, I don't understand. It's just not that heavy. It's just not that cool. It's just not that groundbreaking. And I think it's just that little bit of time where other artists are going to start coming in and using what Metallica taught them. Metallica really set the stage for so many of the bands that would come later. That, of course, if by the time you get to, Load and Reload and Saint Anger and that era, we're getting to the later 90s, there's so many more and more bands that MTV and radio is bringing to the surface that are trying new things. And then the whole new metal thing comes. It's like all of these artists, if you were to grab them and say hey, do you love Metallica? They would all be like, oh yeah. Are you kidding me? I had Metallica posters. I had Metallica t-shirts. They would love it. But if you didn't catch it in that era, I can understand how it just doesn't connect. I'm hopeful that if there's anybody who listens to the show who's a teenager and is checking out Metallica now, they're like, it's amazing, and they find the talent and the skill and ability of that band and just their staying power. God, a band that started in 1981. And we're talking about an album that they would make 10 years into their career. This is their 5th album, the Black Album is. And God, this one that they just released, 72 Seasons. These guys are still writing songs, riffing, and playing. And there's been so many jokes made about Lars Ulrich. I know that there's jokes about him as a drummer. And then, of course, he got all that shit for the Napster attacks. And I've had my fair share of ribs against Lars, but a lot of fond memories of Metallica, and I really do hope I get a chance to see them play live. I think it would be absolutely incredible. So if you are somebody who's a few years older than me and you're dismissive, because I say this because when I've made stuff about the Black Album or said anything about it online, I inevitably get comments that are like, that's when it went downhill. That's when they sold out. That's when it got soft. That's when they lost their thrash edge. And I'd say in some part, you are correct. You are correct that was definitely the turning point for Metallica, where they were no longer this heavy metal band that you listen to in your bedroom, angry and nobody understood. And if anybody heard the screeching vocals and the thrash, they'd be like, oh, turn that down. And then the Black Album becomes radio friendly, right? It becomes MTV friendly. It becomes accessible. And that was a turning point. But I think this made a big difference for me in my life, and I'm sure it did for a lot of you out there. I'm sure a lot of people out there, for as much as this album sold, you can think back about listening to this and whatever it was, whether you were in your room and you were headbanging, or you were angry over something that happened at school and you cranked up your Metallica, or this album, like for me, opened the door to going back and listening to even more Metallica, just getting so into all the things they're putting out there, and begging your mom to grow your hair long. I literally bought a BC Rich Warlock, which is a guitar that kind of spikes out in all the edges right there. I had a BC Rich Warlock because I wanted to look like I was in Metallica. I couldn't afford the classic James Hetfield look to the guitar. But I remember being in a guitar store and thinking, I want that, because I wanted to look heavy. I wanted to look like I was in a metal band. Oh, young Jacob. But that's it. I think we've talked for a hot minute here about everything. I hope I've been recording. I have. Oh, thank goodness. I can't even begin to tell you guys that one time I was doing the show and, the microphone was not on. It was recording on the laptop, and I got done and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Oh, the funs and joys of recording a podcast at your home in your free time. But anyway, thank you guys for joining me. Thank you, my Waterproofians, for yet another fun one. I felt like I really geeked out this time around. Like my brain was going 1,000,000 miles a minute. So I know I was a little scattered as I talked through, but I hope you had fun. And you'll go and listen to the album, or if you never give the album time, go give it some time, see what you think. But this was a lot of fun. It made me smile to reminisce and think about, especially doing the mosh pit and my school dances. So that's another episode of Waterproof Records for the books. Don't forget to check out distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof for your 30% off of your first year. And don't forget, I know I talked about switching merch stores, but I haven't done it yet. I signed up for this other company, and I find that it's not as easy as I thought to switch stores. So I still have my Bonfire merch store. If you go to my link tree on any of my pages, on my Instagram, on my TikTok, in there are my Spotify playlists, my merch, the YouTube channel, my movie, other things that you guys can check out if you're interested in. But I'm so grateful. This podcast is growing. It's getting bigger. It's been pretty exciting to watch, to see how many more listeners are coming in. And I'm getting you from all around the world. I've seen some countries all over the place that are tuning in and listening. And I'm so grateful to have you here. There's more guests on the horizon. I wasn't able to secure any for this this few weeks, but I've got more coming soon. But thank you again. I can't do this without you. I love you. Rock on. I'll see you next time on Waterproof Records.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it. If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna...
Waterproof Records.